everybody, and welcome. We're here at FDIC, and we're getting ready to have a conversation about recruitment and retention. So I am Dr. Candice McDonald. I am a volunteer firefighter. I've been in the fire service for 20 years. I do that by night. By day, I am a chief at NASA in the John Glenn Research Center. And with me, I have my friends, Eric.
Yeah, I'm Eric Quinney, Chief Administrative Officer for Uintah County Fire and Ambulance, and also Chairman of the EMS Rescue Section with the National Volunteer Fire Council.
Dena.
And I'm Dena, a Battalion Chief of the City of Raleigh Fire Department. I'm also the Program Manager for Behavioral Health with the First Responders Center for Excellence.
Oh, so what I hear is that I have some diverse knowledge coming from diverse angles as we talk about recruitment and retention. So excited to have this conversation. One of the things that we know is it's not just volunteer departments, but it's also career departments that are struggling right now with recruitment and retention. So today we're just going to talk about some tactics. And one of the things that I like to say to everybody is, where do we start when it comes to this topic? Well, it comes with taking care of your people. So I'm a bit of a research nerd, and my favorite theory is Freeman's stakeholder theory. And what that theory says is if you take care of your people and you meet their needs, that your organization will thrive. And I know, knowing both of you, that you believe in a lot of those same principles in taking care of your people, and that helps to create a great organization. So I want to talk about some of the barriers that we face in the fire service. And one of the things I want to start with is the barrier of sleep deprivation. So we know whether you're career or you're volunteer, you're often not getting sleep. Sleep, when you don't get sleep, it has a negative impact. And Dena, I know you've done a lot of research on sleep, and can you kind of share your thoughts on the value of sleep and what happens when we don't sleep?
I think that could take up the whole conversation, so I'll try to make it a little more condensed. But no, when I started in this career about 20 years ago, we didn't understand the value of sleep. Sleep wasn't as important as work, and the more you slept, the lazier you were thought to be. If you had a night where you were up all night and you needed to go home and take a nap, that was considered lazy because we would go to our second jobs. But today we know, just like you mentioned, how important sleep is for everything from cancer prevention. A lot of people don't realize just one night of insufficient sleep can actually render 70% of your cancer fighting cells ineffective, to memory, the value of sleep before learning new information, and then the value of sleep when you have to recall that information. But then there's also the value of sleep on processing trauma. And I know today we're talking so much more about the calls we run, how it impacts us. And a lot of us don't realize that we have an inbuilt system to deal with trauma, and that is rapid eye movement sleep, which predominantly occurs towards the end of the night. So if you're not getting on average 8 hours of sleep, you're not allowing yourself to do the things that are necessary to be able to recover and come back the next day.
Yeah, it's so important. And we know both volunteer and career don't sleep. Like you mentioned the point, so many of us, whether you're in the career side, you're getting off work and you're going to that next job, or you're going home, working that honey-do list, taking care of the things you have to do around the house. In the volunteer fire service, you're getting up in the middle of the night, running those calls, and then going to work the next day. So sleep is a big issue. And Eric, how do you see sleep impacting retention in the volunteer fire service?
Well, I think when people are tired, they're tired of doing things, right? And so without that sleep, they get tired of responding to the calls, and their family gets tired of them being gone all the time. So they're leaving the volunteer service because they're tired, and metaphorically and physically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know about you, but when I don't sleep, I get a bit cranky. And when we're cranky, that starts to impact our coworkers, it impacts our family members. So let's talk about some strategies. How do we deal with sleep? Well, I think that starts with having a conversation, like understanding why it's valuable. And I think, Dena, you kind of hit on something. So many of us were like, I can sleep when I'm dead. Let's get all this done. And people, we can just do all these things, but then we fail to take care of our body. So it starts with having that education within the department. So how do we educate our department on the value of sleep? What are some ways to get that education in front of our firefighters?
One of my favorite recommendations was from Dr. Walker, and he said you have to give little bits of information, and it may even be just like a small poster with a few tips. But it also starts with leadership, just like everything else. Our leaders understanding the importance of, say, for example, naps. That's been a very controversial topic because some people do take advantage of that. I know it. I've worked with the people who, if you give them permission to take a nap, they may disappear for a few hours. But, and actually out of NASA, Dr. Allison Brager, she did a lot of research on what she calls tactical napping. And there is some effectiveness to naps, specifically those 20-minute power naps right after lunch. A 20-minute nap, there's science behind what it does for your reaction time, what it does for your memory. But then we also know some of our companies are up all night, and they will run, and we know that there's a very little chance they're going to get any sleep at night. And for those companies, the value of getting a full cycle of sleep, a 90-minute cycle of sleep, late afternoon, early evening, for how it will impact them throughout the night, just, can't be stated enough. So our leaders have to understand this. They have to give permission, but we have to have our boundaries. And I always appreciate when leaders model the ways.
Yeah, absolutely. That modeling is so important. And I think too, and Eric, we talked about this during the recruitment and retention class this morning here at FDIC about how it's important to educate not just the firefighters, but also the families on why maybe they ran that call and they need to take that nap, why it's important for their loved one to take that nap. So how do we incorporate good sleep hygiene within the volunteer fire service?
Well, I think also that's where recruitment is so important, right? We have to have our staffing levels adequate to be able to allow others to do the job as well, to allow for the time off. Especially in the volunteer fire service, sometimes we have the same 10 people responding to the calls, and those calls keep coming, and those people feel an obligation to respond to call after call and not take that needed break. So that's where recruitment is such a huge important part of all of this, is to get our staffing levels adequate and getting people retained to be able to have enough people so it's not all falling on the same people.
Yeah, and we hear that a lot. It's always the same people doing the most. One of the tactics that I like to encourage people to do is to do self-scheduling. Whether that be in a career or a volunteer department, we can self-schedule, and sometimes my career brothers and sisters will be like, we can't do that at the union. But nurses that have unions, they are already doing it in the hospital, in the emergency departments, and it's working. So what is self-scheduling? Well, in the volunteer service, that may look at, rather than requiring your members to run a percentage of calls, because can we predict when emergencies happen? No, so it's kind of silly to say you have to meet 10 or 20% of the calls, but saying if you can give 5 hours a week to the department, and I can create a Google document, a schedule, where my members sign up and say, this is when I'm available, this is when I can respond, you can allow your volunteers to schedule their hours so that they can get sleep or they can meet their family accommodations. And what I've seen, and Dena, in the research, like in the nursing world, is that these nurses, that they've been able to put a scheduling committee together and work with one another within their CBA, within their union guidelines to self-schedule. And they say that it has brought a lot better work environment. It's good for retention because they're not calling off and they're not trying to do everything and be exhausted. So those are some tips that I know that have kind of worked to help with sleep. I think, again, that education. I know the CDC has some really good posters about sleep hygiene and just putting that stuff in your department, downloading those resources, sharing it, doing that education. And again, not just educating the firefighters, but also educating their loved ones, because whether it be someone who's in a relationship with with their partner, or maybe somebody, it's a young firefighter that lives at home with mom and dad. And mom and dad are like, I need you to do this, I need you to do that. Like, wait, I just need to sleep. I just got off from working the shift, or we were up all night at the volunteer fire department. But just so that everybody knows how valuable sleep is. And kind of moving into that, the next thing that I wanted to kind of talk about is when it comes to retention, we also have to worry about our health in general, what we put into our bodies and fitness. So how do we promote good health and wellness within our department? Do either of you have any thoughts on that you want to share?
I think it goes back to what I mentioned earlier again. It's about those modeling the ways and the behaviors. It's so easy to be influenced by the people around you. And I've, worked in several different firehouses with different crews. And when individuals are working out, when they're eating healthy, when they're incorporating those healthy foods, I remember my first firehouse assignment, we made a big pot of tea every morning and we poured like huge cups of sugar in it. And that was a part of like our tradition, our daily routine. And it was so terrible for you. But moving away from that, in the firehouse I have now, we have cases of sparkling water in the fridge, and everybody loves the sparkling water. And at workout time, every single one of us is outside working out. Now, just a very quick story. A couple weeks ago, we had somebody that was floated in to fill in at our firehouse, and we have this, and I think it's like this in most cities, where you eat lunch at 12 and you eat dinner at 6. Now, on the EMS side of the world, they don't have that luxury. But lunch is at 12, dinner is at 6. And so if something keeps you from having dinner ready on time, you'll get chastised. Well, at my firehouse, we prioritize working out. And even if that means eating dinner at 7 or 8 o'clock, we're going to do our workouts. And I remember the kid cooking that day was filling in, and we were getting ready to work out. And I asked him if he was going to join us. And he's like, well, no, because I don't want to make dinner late. You know, we got to have dinner on time. And we all looked at him and we were like, we don't care. And it was just really cool because looked around and every single one of us was in the bay working out. And so I think, again, so much goes back to leadership and leadership modeling the way and being flexible with things like, does it really matter straight up, straight down meal times when we can all get out there and work out together and prioritize that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, that modeling that down from the top is so valuable, and getting those resources and that education in your department. On the volunteer side, one of the things that we did is like, okay, we don't know how to eat healthy. We're really bad at this. And so we actually partnered with the Ohio State University. We brought in their program, and they did this for free, this effective food and nutrition program. And they came in and they actually taught our members and their family members, because we're just, you got to practice it as a family. We brought our families in, and they taught us how to eat healthy on a budget. And so we actually did some food tasting, some food prepping. We worked together. And so not only were we modeling that at the firehouse, but also then our family members were engaged, so that when we went home, we were kind of creating that change. So any thoughts, Eric, about how to make our volunteer fire service a little bit healthier?
Well, like Dena said, modeling the behavior, right? As a chief in my department a few years ago, I found myself at 360 pounds. And I'm looked back and like, what am I doing? What message am I sending to my people? And so I took it as a personal mission. And I didn't ask anybody to come on the mission with me initially. I just did it. And 160 pounds later, having lost, now we're just finishing up a department fitness challenge, where if people meet certain benchmarks, they're getting swag and they're getting things. And so first I wanted to model the behavior, like she said, and then people see the benefits, the increased energy that I have, the increased excitement that I have, the ability to do things, and they're seeing that is creating good things in my life, and they want to have that too. And so it's just not necessarily telling people you have to be more healthy, but just showing people how being healthy is so much better in your life, and the positive impacts it has.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, too, some of that stuff can start so simply as a walking challenge. A lot of times we're like, we don't know how to get to being how fit this person is. Well, maybe you just start a department walking challenge, or not. Are you just getting your members out there walking and doing this challenge, but also their family members? Because, again, it's that accountability at home as well, and doing that education piece. And others, when they're looking at how do I model this, we have to be careful, because there's a lot of gimmicks and stuff out there. Let me sell you the solution to be slim and fit. But if you partner with your hospital or your health department, or like I mentioned, for us, the extension office within your community or state, find out what resources that they have that are out there that are research-based, that are going to come, and those places will come and do that for free. They'll provide that education. So make those partners, make those connections. Those are all great ways. So moving on to...
I want to add one.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was thinking about it. So recently, and it's such a simple idea, we all know everybody loves emergency services. Everybody loves, especially the firehouse. And so they'll come by, bring cookies, they'll bring snacks, they'll bring all this great stuff, and generally none of it is healthy. But it's really hard to resist. And if you're at the firehouse for 24 hours and it's sitting on the counter every time you walk by, even if you say no right in the beginning, later in the day, no doubt, or if you're like me and it's a box of donuts, you'll cut a corner, and then every hour you'll eat another corner, and then by the end of the day you'll eat the whole thing. A recommendation from Megan Lutz, who's a nutritionist in Virginia, she said just put that stuff in a cabinet. Like, you don't have to throw it out, just put it out of sight, put it in a cabinet. And we started doing that, and it's just amazing how much less you snack when it's not right in your face.
Yeah, that's such a great point when you're bringing that stuff in. And I think, too, even learning to say no. If someone calls up and says, hey, I want to drop off a couple dozen donuts, say, I appreciate the thought, but Could we get a vegetable tray instead? And this is why, because we can educate those people that want to bring us those things and say, we'd love that, but, we want to keep our folks healthy because they're at risk for cardiac incidents. They're at risk for these other things. So yeah, that's a great thought. And I'm one of the, if those donuts are in our EOC, I'm like, ooh, that looks good. Let me have that. So yeah, no, very, very good point. So the next thing I want to talk about, we've talked about taking care of our sleep hygiene. We've talked about taking care of our physical stuff. Let's talk about taking care of our mind. And Dena, I know that this is a topic that is very near and dear to your heart when it comes to mental health. And you have a new book out, and you want to talk about some of the work that you've done and just why it's important to to take care of your mental health.
Absolutely. No, thank you for the opportunity. And I am excited. This is the first year that my book is here at FDIC, Hope Out of Darkness. And so about 10 years ago, I found myself just in a dark time, having dark thoughts. And as a first responder, we all take on this role of being helpers and protectors. And we think that if we're struggling or if we're, in need of help ourselves, maybe it indicates that we're not, capable, and it can be humiliating. And so as a research nerd, as yourself, I kind of just started diving into the research on suicide and mental health, and I realized it wasn't just me, that a lot of first responders are struggling. And initially I thought maybe it had something to do with the job of first responder, and I realized we're all human. We just have additional stressors, and I'm glad you hit on the sleep, because one of the factors that's tied to every single mental health disorder is sleep disruption, lack of sleep. So just understanding how these little pieces can tie to our mental health. But the beauty is also understanding in our professions, we have so many protective factors that can actually make us healthier than the general population. But we tend to maybe sometimes lack those in working too hard and staying too busy. I mean, community is such a strong protective factor. Having meals together. And, we just talked about nutrition, and sometimes firehouses, in order to be healthier, they stop eating together. People are bringing their own meals, doing their own thing, not realizing just the value of that community and what community does for mental health. But we know the career for most of us is 30 years, and in 30 years of life's going to happen. And it can be personal. You can have personal losses, financial stresses, there may be illnesses, so many things that none of us can quite predict for ourselves have the opportunity to happen. I think every single one of us is impacted by some sort of traumatic event, whether it's the call, our health, whatever it is. In our career, we're going to be impacted. And just understanding the value of simple protective factors, having a strong community, having a hobby outside of work, prioritizing sleep, having, just something you enjoy doing and actually taking time to do that. These little things make the biggest difference.
No, that is so powerful. And if you haven't checked out Dena's book, I encourage you to do that. People have been raving about it online. So thank you for sharing your wisdom and your knowledge through your book. So I know I look forward to getting my copy and reading it. So
awesome.
Yeah. So when we look at mental health, when I first joined the first responder world, my first year in, my cousin Debbie, who was also a volunteer first responder, we lost her to suicide. And I think now where we're at, because that was so long ago, if those resources would have been in the department, could things have been different for her? Could, her kids have their mom? Could we still have her in our lives? And one of the struggles that we know is our career brothers and sisters, they have really strong EAP programs, and we're seeing a lot of peer support. On the volunteer side, a lot of us are in rural areas where we lack access to behavioral health services. We lack access. We don't really have good insurance that covers it. We're not sure, about those resources. So one thing that the NVFC has done, and that's the National Volunteer Fire Council, if you're not familiar with the NVFC, is they've started a responder, a helpline for first responders, and it's not just for the first responder, but also their families. And Eric, do you want to talk about the hotline that our volunteers and their families can utilize?
Yeah, what's a great thing? I mean, obviously, as first responders, one of the toughest challenges is saying that I need help, right? And saying it in our local community, right? And so what the hotline does is it allows someone to say, I need help, with a little bit of anonymity. That's not, how did I say that word? Kind of a anonymous factor behind it initially to get that person help, because hardest thing for someone to do is to walk into the chief's office and say, I need help, when they know that they need it. So what the hotline is able to do, not only for the responder, but for their families too, is have that initial call out for help. And then that hotline starts tying in local resources to help those people that need it. And so with those numbers being posted in the fire station, somebody's able to say, I need help, without everybody in the firehouse knowing it initially. And that's something that we need to do a better job of is, we don't bat an eye at somebody on blood pressure medication. Why should we bat an eye at someone needing mental health services? Because all those things factor into our overall being, and taking away that stigma on mental health is a huge hurdle that I think are doing a better job of doing, but we still have a long way to go.
No, absolutely. You hit on some very key points. And I know one thing with the NVFC's hotline, again, like we've mentioned, it's not just for the firefighter, but also their family members. Because who's going to start to see some of those struggles first? A lot of times it's those family members. So I also encourage you, bring the families in and do education, not just for the firefighters, but also on the families about what are some things to look for, how to have some of those conversations, and what resources are out there. The other thing that's important too is we know that a lot of departments have chaplains, or they have some connections to their community mental health providers. Don't wait until you have a crisis to bring those people in your department. Form relationships so that when people do have a hard season, that they already have that relationship, whether they be that chaplain, that peer support group, or that community mental health provider. So any last thoughts on this topic before we move on?
I think we tend to overcomplicate peer support, mental health, all of that. And something I try to say, because there are a lot of departments like, we don't have a peer support program, we can't help our members. But I would love to, and this may be an unpopular opinion, I would love to completely do away with peer support and just ensure our companies, our leadership, all understand the value of, number one, knowing resources and creating a safe environment. I remember when I was getting ready to promote, and everybody going through promotional processes, you're learning all these check marks. And one of the check marks is, if a person's struggling, you refer them to EAP. And that almost teaches up-and-coming leaders that when people are struggling, just send them away. When oftentimes the most important thing somebody who's struggling needs is a listening ear. And they don't need a stranger. They don't need you to say, oh, you're damaged, let's call this specialized peer support team. Sometimes your ability to say, hey, Candice, I've noticed you've been struggling lately. I care about you. Do you want to talk? Is so valuable. And then another piece, we look at trying to find culturally competent clinicians, which is really important. Having clinicians that understand our career, understand our stressors, understand our schedules is immensely important in creating relationships. However, there's nothing more important than just simply the relationship between the client and the mental health clinician. And me personally, despite the fact that I've been doing first responder, mental health work for over 10 years, I've led a team in my state. The therapist that I go to is not even a part of our team. I use Psychology Today. I go through the filters and find that person that I just feel I connect with, and somebody completely out of our world, somebody who I don't have to worry about talking to anybody else within our career. And that works for me, but that's also the science behind mental health. It's finding somebody you feel safe with. And a lot of times the safety comes from the relationship, and finding the right therapist is like finding the right pair of running shoes. What works for you may not work for me. So we have to just take time to find somebody we feel comfortable talking to. And the resource Psychology Today is available for anybody to use. I know some states have funding to help reimburse, and oftentimes insurance does a really good job. But sometimes just investing in your mental health can, pay dividends in the long run.
Oh, great points. I think that is, important. And I know the NVFC recognized a while back that not all clinicians are capable of dealing with some of the things that we deal with. We've kind of talked about this. We'll be, someone will go to a clinician and they start to share, and you can see that we've just traumatized our clinician. So the NVFC actually developed a directory of behavioral health providers that have been vetted and have taken an extra training to make sure that they're familiar with what we deal with on a day-to-day. So that's another good list, whether you're a career or volunteer and you're seeking a provider in your community. These are vetted people that people had checked out. Another thing I wanted to kind of touch on is you mentioned, the value in just saying, hey, how are you doing? I think that goes really far, and we don't always do a good job in the volunteer fire service of doing that. In the career, our brothers and sisters, you get to spend the whole day together. Or in the volunteer, sometimes you're showing up just at training night, or you're just showing up to run calls. And it's like, oh, hey, Eric, how's it going? But really, that's oh, good. It's that kind of that fake, superficial thing. But even just saying, hey, Eric, I noticed you haven't been around for training the way you have been. Is everything going on okay at home? Kind of taking that conversation. I haven't noticed this, or this is different about you, or, really having that connection. And maybe Eric will say, I'm taking care of an aging parent, or I have this going on, and things have just been really hard. That might be, oh, that's my trigger. I want to keep checking in on Eric. He has shared this and following up with to make sure things are good. So, Eric, any final thoughts on this?
Just that we need to place a lot of importance and value on taking care of our mental health, just like we do with our physical fitness and everything else, and making that a high priority and showing people it's okay to not be okay at times.
Yeah, absolutely. So good conversation. So the next thing I wanted to kind of touch on is when I did my research on recruitment and retention, I looked at the fire service, and I also looked at the nursing world. And the reason I picked the nursing world is because I feel like those nurses in the emergency department see a lot of the same kinds of things that we do in a sense. So they experience some of those life or death situations. So in looking at that and what made a difference for retention, one of the things that did not pop up is money. Nobody cares about money when it comes to retention, believe it or not, even though we kind of tell ourselves, oh, pay them more, they'll stay. If you're a volunteer, let's offer them a stipend, they'll stay. But we even know that departments that have gone to stipends, they're still not getting people. And even in our career departments, people that are in a bad organization with bad leadership and a bad culture, it doesn't matter what they're making, they're saying, I need to find another place to work. So those non-wage benefits and that culture and that environment within that organization is so important. So what are some things when we're creating a positive culture within our department that we need to really focus on when it comes to leadership? Because we know a lot of times, how are leaders promoted? They're promoted because they're good what? They're good firefighters. They don't always get those leadership skills. So what are some things that our leaders looking to retain their people, some tips and tricks that they can do to become better leaders?
That's actually what my class is going to be all about tomorrow.
All right, and what time is your class?
It's 1:30.
All right, so if you're here at FDIC, make sure you check out Dena's class.
Yeah, so organizational leadership and mental wellness. And I'll tell you, the book that really just solidified me going down that path and just adding to that research was Simon Sinek's book, Leaders Eat Last. Mm-hmm. He talks so much about when you take on the responsibility of a leader, it's no longer about you. It's about the people in your charge. And he goes into, our biology and, stress hormones and, how to stop cortisol from being released and how to increase the release of oxytocin. I know it's like, okay, why are we talking about, stress hormones? But when cortisol is released, your body goes into fight or flight, self-protect, and you're not wanting to work with other people. You're not thriving. You're not able to think well when you're in that self-protect. When that shuts off and the oxytocin's released, that's actually when you want to work with other people. That's when you become more creative. You can problem solve. So for me, I'm not really always thinking about like, how do I release oxytocin in the people I work with? But I'm constantly thinking about the environment that I'm creating. Do the people that work with me feel safe? Mm-hmm. And I know we talk a lot about snowflake, generations, and, if you coddle them, they're not going to be productive. But it's not about that. Like, you can have high standards and treat people with respect. And people want those standards. People, there's three little tricks to building a strong team. Number one, have the standard. Number two, let people know that you believe in them. And number three, make sure that they know that they're a part of this team. This team is special, and there's this high standard for this team. You give them that little recipe, they'll do anything, and they'll want to stay. And like you said, it has nothing to do with the pay. People want to be a part of a great team, but they want to be valued. So, and just thinking back to just human biology and that self-protection, it's all about what we as leaders can do to help humans thrive. And a lot of it comes back to what I just said. It's just making them feel valued, giving them goals to reach for, and supporting them in that.
I think that is so powerful. And one of the things that I share in my class is I always challenge people, ask your people, How can I help you be successful? Ask those questions. And if somebody is not being successful, kind of get to the root of, what's going on. Have a conversation, because people don't show up and they don't want to be bad firefighters. They want to do good. Sometimes we need to help them. And this kind of takes me back to a story. So when I started in the mental health profession at the age of 18, my first day on the job, my boss Thomas says to me, he says, your first task is you're going to tell Ed that he stinks. I said, what? And I was raised, if you have nothing nice to say, don't say anything at all. He says, Ed smells. Ed was a client we had hired to do some IT work, and he did have a tremendous body odor that was disrupting the office. So Thomas said my first job was to tell Ed that he stunk. So I did, and I procrastinated all day. I took Ed to lunch, and then I was driving him home, and I was like, okay. So I finally said, Ed, we need to have a conversation. I said, I don't know if you noticed, but I don't know if your deodorant's not working. Sometimes you got to change it up, but there's this odor. And Ed says to me, I know I stink. I have to make a choice between either going to the laundromat and washing my clothes or paying for bus fare to get to work. How profound was that? Just asking that conversation, having that conversation that here was this challenge. Well, we were able to get Ed some bus fare so that then he didn't have to pick. But Ed wanted to come to work and do a good job. So a lot of times people may be having these barriers, and if we don't find out what the issue is, then we don't know why they're not performing the way that they want to be. So that was just such a valuable lesson for me at a young age, to really ask people, what's keeping you from being successful? What are some of those barriers, and how can we as leaders help you to overcome those barriers? So Eric, I want to kind of shift the conversation over to you. So looking at in the organization and the work that you've done, what are some tips that you have from a leadership standpoint to help your people be successful?
Well, I think just in order to cultivate an opportunity for success is realizing that a cookie cutter approach doesn't work for everybody, right? It's playing off that word cultivation and planting. Some plants need the sun, others don't. And so basically individualizing people's growth and cultivating that individually, because what works for Bob doesn't work for Fred. And being able to find out what does work for Johnny and what's better for Billy, and going after those and honing in on everybody's individual need, especially in the volunteer fire service. Everybody comes from such diverse backgrounds, and applying that cookie cutter approach, there's not a lot of there's growth in certain people, but you're not seeing growth in others, and you've got to realize that not everybody responds to the same things. And so having diversity and just being able to engage people differently and in individual fashion helps everybody grow, hopefully, together, instead of just that cookie cutter. Some people thrive in that, and then other people just fall away and leave, and that's not what we want. We want, when we're talking about recruitment and retention, we want everybody to stay, we want everybody to grow, we want everybody to have success. So individuality and honing in on what makes everybody tick, and that's different for each and every one of us.
No, that is so true, Eric, and that kind of ties into the last topic that I want to have a conversation about, and that is about mentoring and empowering others. So I think all of us can say that we are here today where we're at because of strong mentors, or because somebody empowered us and said to us, it doesn't matter if other people think that you're silly or foolish for pursuing these goals and these dreams, that you're on the right path, keep pushing forward and you will get there. So mentoring. Dena, what does mentoring look like for you, and empowering others, and how has that impacted your life?
Man, I think I could take all of the time here on this, because you're right, mentoring is so incredibly important. And especially, I've learned for me, being a female, being a minority, in the fire service, I truly needed mentorship, and I needed somebody to make me feel like I belonged, and to make me feel that I was appreciated. And I remember we would have these conversations about equity and inclusion, and every time the conversation about equity comes up, you see the little boxes where the short person's on the high box and the tall person's in the little box. And we look at that and we're like, okay, that doesn't work in the fire service. You can't give a female a really high box so that they can all of a sudden have maybe the same strength or capability of a man. But I had a mentor tell me once, and it was just so profound. He said, that's not what mentorship looks like. Maybe it's me recognizing you don't come from the volunteer fire service, so you don't have a up on some of the job knowledge and some of the job behavior. So me as a mentor, I see that, and I invest a little more time in you in teaching that. And that was just really profound to me, because I realized, even though I may not have come in with the same experiences, because let's be real, women in the fire service are still a very small percentage. And so we do have some skills and techniques that we have to learn. And it doesn't mean we're not capable. It just means that we need somebody to invest in us and show us how to do things, or show us a few tricks of the trade. So that mentorship's huge. And I mean, it's even carried me to today. I work as the program manager with the First Responder Center for Excellence, and that only came about from mentorship. Chief Lieb, who's the managing director of the First Responder Center for Excellence, he recognized some of my work, he recognized some of my articles, and he reached out to me and not only asked me if I want to be a part of it, but he's invested in teaching me and helping me to be successful and investing his time in me. And I appreciate that so much, and I know how it makes me feel. So that's what I'm constantly doing, because now I am at that point where it's like, wow, I have less years left than I've got on the job. So it's no longer about me. It's about finding the people behind me and helping them to be successful. Sometimes it's just about believing them and giving them little opportunities here and there.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that is so powerful, and I think no matter where we're at in our career, we have an opportunity to be a mentor and to mentor others. And I mean, it's just, it goes a long way. And mentoring, it's about too, sometimes people, it's good to have a mentor that's able to call you out too when you're struggling.
Yeah.
So I know one of my mentors, Steve Austin, when I make a mistake, because we're humans and we're going to make a mistake, he'll say, well, it's not a career ender, but here's how we're going to progress forward. And so having those people that you can have those honest conversations and call up and say, hey, I'm at a crossroads. I don't know what to do. How do I get there? And it was at FDIC, gosh, it's been over a decade ago when I was here. I got the Dear John rejection letter from a university that I was not getting into a PhD program for the second time. And Steve Austin says, I have two gentlemen I want you to meet. I'm like, okay, who's that? And it was Dr. Harry Carter and Dr. Dennis O'Neill. He pulled them and he says, they're going to help you reach your goal. They've already been there, and they did. They went through, they looked at my rejection letter, they said a few words that I probably can't say on the show, and they had the path that you're going to go. And they, again, it goes back to they in me. Not only did they believe in me in that moment, but they helped push me through and checked on me, throughout that journey. So I think that's, that's kind of that value of mentoring. And when we're talking about a volunteer department, when somebody comes in, it can be overwhelming. Because you come in, you don't know anybody, you don't know anything, things are moving fast. So having that mentor, somebody you can assign somebody to be able to connect with, it gives them somebody they can gravitate to on the fire scene in the department, so that they don't feel so alone on that island. So Eric, how do you see mentorship playing into all this?
Well, exactly. I mean, everybody that comes into a situation deserves an opportunity for success. They deserve to know what it takes to be successful, that roadmap, so to speak, right? And a mentor should be that little voice on our GPS telling us how to get to where we're going. And if we do make a wrong turn, to say, hey, take a U-turn, or pause, or and this is how long it's going to take you to get there, and and being realistic, and so that mentor, it really provides that opportunity for success and allow that person not to have to navigate it alone and try to figure out where they're going. I'm not sure how we got places 30 years ago. We got lost a lot. People don't have to get lost these days. With successful mentorship, they should be able to have a good partnership to help get to where they're going and what it takes to be successful, and not just try to figure it out on their own.
Yeah, absolutely. And I encourage you, if you're at FDIC and you're here listening, talk to the instructors. You would be surprised how many of them will be willing to mentor you. Reach out, ask questions. They will engage with you. But if you don't ask the questions, you don't take that brave step. And sometimes you have to be brave when you're, and step out and ask these folks, hey, I have a question. How do I get to be where you're at? What steps do I need to take to become you in your position? Ask those questions, engage with the instructors, and if you're at that level in your career where you can give back, don't be selfish. Pass that knowledge forward, do the next generation a benefit, and do our industry a benefit. Well, I want to thank both of you for participating in this conversation today. You both bring so much knowledge and expertise, and so thank you both. And again, come and check out Dena's book, check out Dena's class tomorrow, and be able, to embrace everything that's going on here. And thank you from FDIC, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.